morning and good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Black Fire Rising. I'm your host, Terry Emeka Thomas, and many of you may or may have picked up on the fact that I was a teacher in the classroom for 20 years, and education has been a part and parcel of what Black Fire Rising has been about. Starting out with focusing on black history in the curriculum and expanding to politics and the nature of politics and education curricula and education in general. Today, we have Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Educators, Chris Bauman. Hello, Mr. Bauman.
Hi, Terry. Thanks for having me today.
For full disclosure, I'm a lifetime member of NEA Retired through GAE. So if this seems biased, that's because it's intentional. Chris, you and I have been on the front line, and there's a grave problem going on in public education with regards to the governor, with his intentions to take over poor and failing schools. Let's just move right into that and talk about the parameters and the problems associated with an administration wanting to take over poor and failing schools. First of all, what is poor and failing schools?
So this is when Governor Deal was reelected last year, one of his first major initiatives in last year's legislative session was he wanted the creation of what he called an opportunity school district, which is modeled on what's called a recovery school district in Louisiana and New Orleans in particular. And then it's also been done in Tennessee and Michigan as well. The way that the legislation is written now, based on Governor Deal's administration's definition, there's about 140 what they call failing schools. And these are public schools around the state of Georgia that based on their criteria, for 3 years scored below 60 on the CC RPI index. And based on that, there's about 140 schools that the state, if they get the approval from the voters, and we can talk about that more, the state will come in and take over these schools.
So what happens to the superintendents of these?
What will happen is, so they basically would create a statewide school system. So we have 180, 181 school systems now in the state of Georgia. This would create a new school system that would be statewide. And the governor would hire a superintendent for this new opportunity school district. And I think it would have to get Senate approval, but they would report directly to the governor. These schools, about 20, up to 20 a year, could move into this opportunity school district. So the superintendents over the different local school systems would still stay in place, but they would no longer be over the opportunity schools that go into this new school district.
Now, what about the state elected superintendent?
Has no role whatsoever in this process. And so it's all directly in the governor's office. From what we can tell, that the Department of Education and the state school superintendent would probably have little to no involvement directly in the opportunity school district based on how the legislation is written.
So he would take away the responsibility of an elected official.
Right, that's correct. Well, I mean, superintendents, of course, are hired by local school board, which are, elected locally, and they hire superintendents. But this superintendent would be hired by the governor and then have to be approved by the Senate.
And once again, tell us about the makeup of the opposition to this. Stop OSD.
Right. Well, there's not been a formal coalition at this point, but there's been kind of a loose knit of groups that have been out there teacher organizations like ours, parent organizations, community organizations, faith-based organizations that have started grassroots efforts to talk about our concerns about this strategy. And we've looked at the other three systems that have done this. And
Are there any successes?
Of limited, if that much. So if you look at New Orleans, there's only, most of all the schools that are in the recovery district were converted to charter schools. And I think there's only 6 traditional public schools left in the city of New Orleans. And so a lot of the data is mixed at best in terms of what the results have been. Of course, there's a lot of confusion a little bit because a lot of the students that were there before, pre-Katrina had left the city, and so a lot of the numbers are hard to look at. A report just came out this week on the Tennessee Recovery District, basically arguing that it has not worked well, and almost claims that it has failed. And there's also been a lot of concerns raised in Michigan. We had a press conference on Thursday, November 17th at 1 p.m., working with the Annenberg Institute for School Reform, the Southern Education Foundation, who put together a paper about investing in what works. And in that paper, which is available on our website, you could go to www.gae.org and read the paper, which gives a really strong research-based critique. We think the recovery systems have been a failed approach, but we didn't, as educators, just want to talk about what's not working. We wanted to put our own ideas on the table. And the Annenberg Institute and the Southern Education Foundation have talked about 8 principles that we think you should have community schools. Instead of pulling a school out of the community for a statewide district, we think you should invest in the community, and so that the parents, the teachers, the community surrounding the school really invest and determines what's best inside of that school system.
Now,
or that particular school.
My reaction to what happened with Governor Deal's approach, I wrote a letter to the editor in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They decided to publish what they thought would be appropriate. The part they left out was I angled my letter to say that this was an assault on public education by Republicans nationwide, and this is part of a trend to bring in the charter system and private school system, privatization, because these governors and their cronies stand to benefit great from the construction of those schools to the personnel. So for Governor Deal to enact or attempt such a move on the backs of Black, Latino, and poor people, I think that is vulture capitalism, if you ask me. But what do you think of this Republican angle to privatize education nationwide? Is this part of...
Well, I'd say, if you look at this particular legislation, the Opportunity School District, it required a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. And there, while it was a majority of Republicans, there was one Democratic senator that voted with that majority to get to the 2/3, as well as 11 Democrats in the House. And of course, we were concerned, both Democrats and Republicans that voted for it. And so that was a concern, that there were folks on both sides of the aisle that bought into that. We definitely have concerns. Now, there are, directly, you cannot have for-profit charter systems in the state of Georgia, but a lot of the research we found is that there is money that can be made in the back door, both through tax credits, but also that sometimes the management firms make money, and so there, we do have a concern, nationwide, that it can be a money-making vehicle, much like prisons have been, with the private sector prisons that have been there. As our organization, we believe in the value of public schools. That's who we represent: public school educators, teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers.
And that's another thing.
Yep.
Personnel. This is a blow aimed at unions, because not only will he control construction, but personnel as well, if he gets his way, and
Are you talking about inside the school buildings or?
statewide.
Well, I mean, in terms of what happens in the school buildings, our concern is that teachers can lose their jobs there without any fair dismissal.
Right.
So you could have teachers that have worked hard there, and what happens to them, right? Because they'll have the ability to convert. They can still keep it a public school, traditional public school, or they can convert it to a charter school, and they can bring in new staff. Now they have the option, to keep current teachers, but if for folks they decide to get rid of, the question is what happens to them, all right? Do they go back to the school system? The other piece that we have concerns that we think the strength of having local control school boards, that school boards should decide whether services are privatized in a school, and there's definitely a mechanism in the bill that if they wanted to take janitors, even cafeteria workers, and privatize that work, which can be, for profit. That private industries can come in, do the work, and make a profit. And we would certainly be concerned. Now, some local school systems make that decision. We're, as an organization, against privatization. We believe that keeping it in-house, public employees is the way to go. But we certainly have concerns about the bill. And what I should mention, which we haven't talked about, is that this will go before the voters. So while this bill has been enacted, the Constitution in the state of Georgia was set up that local school boards are who runs public schools. And so in order for even though this legislation has been passed by the legislature, and that just required a majority vote, but the two-thirds vote that I mentioned earlier was to get this on the ballot, a referendum. And so it's actually going to be up to the voters in Georgia when we go to the polls November 2016. It'll be the same ballot when you go in to vote for president, U.S. Senate, and other congressional races. At the very bottom of that ballot, and we don't know what the amendment number is going to be, that's where the voters are going to have the say. And so our concern is our recommendation would be for folks to vote no on that amendment to keep local control, schools controlled at the local level.
So, how many members do you have in your association?
Right about 30,000. That includes, that's our active teachers. We have education support personnel. We have student members as well as retired members. But collectively, we have about 30,000 members.
So we have GAE and GFT and PAGE.
That's right.
All three they're together on this, right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, we've all been involved in talking about ways to defeat it. I mean, we've all we've been coordinating at this point. We've been doing a lot of strategies through our own organizations, but there are conversations about how we can work together as we move forward, into the new year.
Now, I know GAE stands for the Georgia Federation of Teachers.
No, Georgia Association of Educators, GAE.
Okay,
Yeah.
GFT.
GFT is the Georgia Federation of
Federation
Teachers.
of Teachers.
That's correct.
That's AFT's state affiliate.
That's correct.
And NEA is your national parent organization.
Yep.
PAGE, I don't know, can you explain to us what PAGE is?
PAGE is also it's a professional organization of educators in the state of Georgia, and they have members all across the state as well.
And along with that coalition, we have like 41 different organizations and affiliates, associations, working and talking to mount up a strategy. And because this is serious, taking over public education and putting it in the hands of a governor who has questionable ethics. As you, excuse my audience, I have a slight cold, but this is just as important. Bear with me. I think it's important because public education has been the hallmark of upward mobility for black, brown, everybody,
That's right.
for generations. And for the Republicans to want to dismantle the Department of Education and all things associated with, I think that's appalling. So what I'm getting at is there's a struggle in terms of who educates our children. Because being an educator for 20 years myself, you have to learn to love what you do as a teacher. And the reward is modeling young men and women to be good citizens. I'll never forget working with students in my class, teaching them how to do things in art, journalism, and mass media, and them grow up into the profession of education as a result of working with them closely. When it comes to personnel, how would the governor approach it?
In terms of the Opportunity School District?
Uh-huh.
Well, as I mentioned, there's different options that they would have in this bill. One is they could keep it a traditional school, but they can also move it to a charter school, and even at some point close the school down is an option that they have inside of that plan. And so what happens to the personnel is very unclear, but definitely if the new superintendent of the Opportunity School District decided to bring in a new staff, they would certainly have that ability. And that's our concern, is that teachers without fair dismissal could be removed from the school, and necessarily it's not their issue what had happened. I mean, there's a lot of great things going on in the Opportunity schools, and there's a lot of evidence that a lot of these schools are improving. That through the Georgia Department of Education, there are priority and focus schools where they've been working with schools to improve. There are efforts already in place by local school districts where a number of these schools are improving. And even our state school superintendent, Mr. Woods, when he first came on board as the state school superintendent, he really put out some good information that he was visiting a number of these schools, and that you wouldn't know that based on this failing word that was happening. He saw teachers and students engaged around public education to make everything the best, a good public education that's possible. Students are working hard, the faculty is working hard, all the support staff is working hard to improve the schools. And I think the common denominator that you see in the Opportunity School Districts is their high poverty schools, right? So there's a lot of pressures that are on these schools. There's a lot of transient, so you might start with one group of students at the beginning of the year, lose some students, get some new students in. And so just to blame the teachers and the staff, there's much larger issues at hand. And so your question about what happens to the personnel is that, we're worried that they could be pushed out and new folks come in, but the same challenges are going to be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In these high poverty areas, I taught in one for years, and the variables are different. I'm an art teacher, right, primarily, and I remember in my high poverty area, we had a low rating for the school, and my budget for art supplies was $200 a year. Somebody got the bright idea to put me in the wealthy area because I was having such success with my poor students. My budget for the wealthy areas was $4,000 a year in art supplies, plus what the business community contributed. Equity, parity. Where's the equity and parity when you got $4,000 plus versus a $200 budget?
That's right. And that's a clear inequity, and that's a really good example where, if you're in a school system that has parents with bigger financial means, they do a PTO fundraiser, they have a lot more capacity to raise money. If you're at a school system where parents are struggling with minimum wage jobs, maybe working 2 or 3 jobs, they just don't, they have the desire to give to their kids, but there's only so much money if your paycheck is smaller. And that's an inequity. And that's why, we're not saying that reform doesn't need to happen in the schools, but we think there needs to be more investment in the schools. And that's why we've put together, an alternative plan that's surrounded around expansion of pre-K, and that's something the governor is for as well, which we applaud that. We think that's an important thing, that students get a good base. We think that you have to have stable leadership. One of the themes, we have members in all of these OSD schools, and we've surveyed them, and one of the big issues is stable leadership. That, if principals are moving in and out every 1, 2, 3 years, it's hard to build a consistency. We believe that you have to have strong quality teachers with a strong pay scale, but also with the ability, with this toxic testing that we have, to truly be teachers and to truly teach. We believe that we need to invest more wraparound services. And so you have students with a lot of needs. They might have healthcare needs. They may need, parents are working 2 and 3 jobs. They may need more after-school help in terms of tutoring. We think culturally competent curriculum is a very important piece. We think having restorative, rather than zero tolerance discipline, more of a restorative discipline procedure that can be put into place. We think a lot of these elements, smaller classroom sizes, good quality teachers, we think that's the alternative that we need. And a lot of that is how we invest, but also engaging. It's really about the culture of the school, and that's where leadership comes in, is that, I was just with some teachers the other day at a Title I school down in Coweta County, and the teachers talked about they ride the bus home. And that way they can, see where the kids live. They're with the kids on the bus. They're able to build some relationships with the parents, and so that the school day goes beyond the classroom. They're really trying to engage what happens, and so there's a lot of good examples of really community schools working. And that's what we believe should be the alternative, rather than the Opportunity School District. And again, the evidence in Louisiana, Tennessee, and Michigan, we think has not been a successful approach, but that's why we wanted to put a different approach on the table.
You talked a little bit about curriculum.
Yes.
I guess that's a segue for me to talk about Georgia HB 481, of which I have advocated for, with Tyrone Brooks, former state representative of the People's Agenda, and Ron Mayo. What House Bill 481 is the mandating or requirement to teach Black history from kindergarten through 12th grade, from an African-centered perspective, as well as Native American history, Latino women, and the Jewish Holocaust history, from their perspectives, instead of the Eurocentric oppressors' perspective. Now, what do you think Governor Deal would make of such a bill proposal?
I mean, I've never talked to the governor, so I don't know, what he would do with that proposal. Yep.
But we want to bring it back and I'll take it out of committee and put it to the vote, debate and vote, so that these areas, these ethnicities, and if you're out there listening and you heard your ethnicity, this is what I call the pedagogy of the oppressed.
Paula Freire, yeah. Yep.
That's just my interpretation of it. These 5 ethnicities and gender issues, gender issues as well. So I just wondered out loud in my letters to the editor what would happen to such a bill. But if you know your congressman and you heard your interests spoken to, be sure and let them know and notify them, talk to them about HB 481. That is the bill to teach Black history, Native American history, Latino history, women's history, and the Jewish Holocaust. Support this bill, public, because on People TV, we believe in equity and equality. And equality goes a long way in terms of restoring our humanity. Those of us who have been oppressed by the Eurocentric value system that has been impressed upon us educationally. So, getting back to Governor Deal, uh, what are the chances of this bill passing?
I mean, I haven't, I'm not aware that we've worked on it directly. I mean, you may have talked, I think you've done more work on it. I mean, I would trust, your judgment. I'd have to go back to check. I don't know if GAE's taken a position on that bill, but we certainly will take a look at it. I'll bring it up with our organization. But speaking of from my personal perspective, outside of, the GAE, I mean, I've certainly, you and I were talking a little bit before the show, when I was a student at the University of North Carolina, I was involved with a group of students where this was a big issue on our campus at the university level, at a public university, where we were trying to get more African American culture, Latino culture, and others, in terms of course offerings and that availability. And we actually worked to build a freestanding Black Cultural Center, the Sonia Haynes Stone Black Cultural Center, which exists today. So,
What's it called?
the Sonia Haynes Stone Black Cultural Center.
Okay.
And we, when I was a student at the university, at the time, this was late 80s, early 90s. The Black Cultural Center was a snack bar, literally an old snack bar in the student center. It's small, smaller than this studio, and it basically just had glass walls, and that was supposed to be the center. And when a really popular African American professor died on campus, her name was Sonia Haynes Stone, died really early from an aneurysm, and she'd been a big advocate for all students. And we came together mourning her death, and a lot of the students looked at the legacy of the civil rights movement on our campus, and one of the things that the students in the 60s had talked about was building a really strong state-of-the-art Black Cultural Center. And so we took up the mantle, so to speak, and really started to organize for that. And it was a very tough effort. I mean, a lot of folks said that we were being black separatists, and we were saying this is black and white students, right? All students, no matter what background you come from, we're a state-of-the-art university. We should have it. And long story short, I mean, it was a very long struggle, but now we're really proud as a legacy we left that it's a beautiful standing building that has art, culture, history from the African American and African, as well, history. And I think it's a good example. And also looking to have Latino centers. I know that's on some college universities. Native American, the different perspectives are brought to history. And personally, as myself, I think there's value at all levels. From I mean, I saw that as a at a public university, but that learning starts at an early age. And so personally, I would see value in those, having the different perspectives. And as you talked about, Afrocentric, Latino-centric, in terms of bringing those perspectives to history, arts, and culture, and the whole gambit, basically.
The humanities.
The humanities, that's right. So personally, I have that belief. And again, I can't remember, we may have taken a position. I can't, there's a lot of bills.
Yeah.
I have to go back and check in terms of GAE on that front.
So, Robert, we got 3 minutes left? 30 minutes left. Okay. So, 'tis the season, holiday season. I'm here dressed up in this garb, I say, buba, African attire, because 'tis the season for holidays. And one of the main holidays that African Americans have gravitated for and to is Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa started in 1966 by Dr. Maulana Karinga. I've had the good fortune of crossing paths and working with Dr. Karinga. And he started Kwanzaa to provide African Americans a cultural retrieval, trying to retrieve that part of their humanity that was cut off, literally cut off. Let's think of looking at Kunta Kinte and his foot being cut off. If he decided to call himself Toby or Kunta, cut off. That's graphic. That's real. What Kwanzaa does is try to reconnect using the language of Kiswahili and the principles of the Nguzo Saba, 7 principles of blackness. And at the Shrine of the Black Madonna here in Atlanta, which is like the epicenter of Kwanzaa activities, we will be working Kwanzaa, doing and celebrating Kwanzaa for 7 nights at the shrine. The night that I will be coordinating will be the night of self-determination, or Kujichagulia. We will have as a keynote speaker Charlotte Williams from the African American Studies Department at Clark Atlanta University, and she will deliver the message of Kujichagulia, self-determination, which she has delivered. This is her 3rd year doing it. And our Kwanzaa, and we have a very varied approach. We have jazz piano, R&B, African dance, spoken word, just a hodgepodge of African brilliance and talent. That'll be on Sunday, December 27th, at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, celebrating the principle of Kujichagulia, or self-determination. Now, Chris, I know that's a lot of information. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about, when you see Kwanzaa, what do you think as an everyday American?
I mean, I remember learning about it actually, when I was in college, and friends that celebrate it, and so I know there's 7 days. I think it starts after Christmas.
December 26th to January 1st.
Yeah, that's right. And I think every day has a theme.
A principle.
Like you talked about a principle, right? That you talked about self-determination. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but I remember that's kind of the core value. Every day celebrates a different principle, and the principle of self-determination. I mean, that's a principle that I've really believed in since really as a teenager. I'm a firm believer in democracy, and my whole career has been around community organizing, labor organizing. That people should be able to speak for themselves, and that's part of living in a democracy in terms of shaping our dreams and aspirations and what's best. And so that's always been for me, really important principle that all cultures, everybody should live by, and that's the part of being in the democracy we are, right? Creating the beloved community, creating that table where all cultures, where we, one of the things we talked about, I talked about what the Black Cultural Center organized, and the word we used was pluralism. That people keep their identity. And everybody brings those to the table in terms of shaping a democracy, rather than kind of the diversity where we're all, mixed in. That where everybody has their traditions and cultures, and the beloved community. That conversation. Howard Fuller and Dr. King talked about those principles. Of trying to create that in a democracy around all communities having self-determination. Terms of what we do and believe in. But
Absolutely.
yeah, and I know there's the other 7 principles. I don't remember them all off the top of my head.
Let's see if I can go through them. The first one is Umoja, which is unity. Mm-hmm. And the second one is, as I said, self-determination. Kujichagulia, Ujima. Excuse me.
Yeah, excuse.
Ujima, which means collective work and responsibility. Ujamaa, which means cooperative economics, because that's very important for blacks to support themselves and one another in business. and entrepreneurship, and even traditional businesses, whether it's a barbershop or a beauty salon, but also the Afrocentric businesses. I bought this at the Afrocentric Network in the West End Mall. I go there every year to patronize because I think it's important from a Pan-African perspective. Ujamaa, after Ujamaa, you have Kaumba, which means creativity, Nia, which means purpose, and Imani, which means faith. In our faith, we believe in our ancestors, the great Shango, the great Osiris, or Horus, the great connecting forces of Ma'at. Ma'at being the first code of behavior ushered down from the Nile River Valley. Ma'at, M-A-A-T. Google it, M-A-A-T. Google it, my friends who doubt what I'm talking about. Now, you may not get the real Afrocentric version of it, but you will get something. M-A-A-T, Ma'at. And faith in the ancestors, because we as a race have been confused by many religions. And I think it's time to return to the source, the beginning, Ma'at. And I won't go any further on that, because religion is very touchy. Politics is touchy too, but we've been talking politics, and we're going to talk some more. In the Georgia Assembly, what is the percentage of Republicans versus Democrats?
Right now, the Republicans have super majorities. I think in both houses. If not, I think they might be off by one at this point. I know there were some special elections over this year, but it's definitely super majorities.
Super majority.
Yeah.
That means they can do anything they want to do.
I mean, they definitely have the majority, but I think as we start around public education, I think one of the lessons I've learned is that it's not always a one party versus the other. A lot of the votes are, you have some Democrats that will not always vote on public education issues, and then you have solid Republicans. So the politics around public education, really, it's a whole spectrum of folks that you have that are more that stand on the public education perspective versus some that may push more the charter school agenda, moving in that direction.
Now, I heard talk of Georgia turning blue the last election when Obama was running, President Obama was running. They were talking about Georgia trending blue. Florida, he's won Florida twice, which is a very Republican state. So is there any merit or truth to that Georgia turning blue, or do you think?
Well, I mean, it definitely. I mean, a lot of, and I'm not an expert. I wouldn't pretend to be, but in terms of reading the political pundits, that the demographics in Georgia are changing, and will continue to change over the next 10 to 20 years. And if the current trends stay the same, there'll be more African American, Latino, Asian people, the population in the state of Georgia. And so if trends stay the same in terms of, Democratic, versus Republican voters in those different groups, that a lot of people believe, Georgia will be purple. I think it'll be more, I don't know it'll be the next 4 years to 8 years, but, a lot of folks think 8 years and beyond, that Georgia will be much more of a battleground state. You look at the North Carolina, Virginia, Florida, as an example you used, Ohio, that Georgia, if trends stay the same. A lot of people talk about Arizona in that same light, that they'll be much more, bigger potential battleground states. But, time will tell if those trends, and of course, politics change. But if a lot of the politics the same way. Chances are it will at least be a purple state.
Purple.
Yep.
So do you believe that candidate Hillary Clinton can hold together the Obama coalition?
I mean, I think time will tell. I mean, certainly at the national level, our national organization, NEA, has endorsed Hillary Clinton. We'll see in terms of, what, I mean, President Obama's campaign was historical in terms of the engagement he was able to get across race, across age, from young people to folks of all ages that really rallied around, his historic campaign, especially in 2008. Was very historical that I think any candidate, will have a hard time, building that type of energy. I think time will tell, but I think, she'll put together a broad coalition of, and I think a lot of the same folks that were in the Obama coalition will be there with the Democrats.
I was a part of that 2008 cadre. I sold T-shirts. I did phone banks.
Mm-hmm.
Right in the community where I lived over there in Kirkwood, and right out of the restaurant, and went to meetings at churches, and it was just something historic about it. Many of my people said, it's not going to happen. I said, well, if it's not going to happen, it won't happen if you don't do anything. But
Right.
if you do something, it might happen.
Yep.
And it happened twice. So, as far as candidate Clinton keeping the coalition together, well, she don't have to worry about things falling apart, because if Donald Trump keeps running his mouth about Muslims and Latinos and every ethnic that he seems to insult, the coalition will be right there for her. I don't want to get into too much Donald Trump, because he get a lot of airtime anyway. Did you watch the debate last night?
I didn't get a chance to watch. I heard some of the news reports this morning about it. Yep.
I didn't watch it either.
Yep.
But I do think that we're on the precipice of permanent change as far as progression is concerned. And if we can elect the first female president, that too would be in itself
Historical, that's right.
And
You'd go from first African American president to the first women president. I mean, it really showed that politics are really transforming in the United States. Especially see the role that women have played in terms of leaders in other countries around the world. We're definitely catching up, as a major world leader in terms of having a woman president. You look at Germany, Great Britain. Many other countries have already been led, by women at the top. So it would be great to see that in the United States of America, just like we broke the barrier around race in 2008, bringing women into politics at the very top level. And I think it's hard to argue that she'd be one of the most qualified presidential candidates we've had in a long time in terms of the
I
background
remember
she
watching
brings
her
to the table.
testify at that 11-hour
Right.
grilling.
That's right. She's
I mean, and Donald Trump says she doesn't have stamina.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue that, right, exactly, and she's proven that over time.
I mean, 11 hours of that type of grilling, that is the epitome of stamina. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But more power to Hillary. Black Fire Rising endorsed Hillary. So that's just the way we do it here. So in terms of local politics, how do you motivate teachers and community members to vote their interests in educational?
Right. Well, and that's our focus of GAE is that we support candidates that support public education, and so as we talked about earlier, that's Republican and Democrats. That we got to have a coalition, a cross party that's pro public education, and we live in a democracy, and those who show up are who drive what happens. And the big thing that we've really been trying to encourage our members is tell your stories. I mean, I move all over the state. Our president, Sid Chapman, moves all over the state, and we hear stories about the struggles that our members deal with inside the classroom, and we really encourage them, build a relationship with your legislators and tell your stories, because really public education should not be about whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It's the common good. It's about it's what sets the United States apart from other areas in the world, that we do provide that public education, right? That's the equalizer in our country. That it should be, you come from any economic background, any state, rural, suburban, urban, that you have a chance in the United States of America to become president of the United States. That's the dream, right? That's the pursuit of happiness, and we know we've had many barriers, since the founding of our country to those ideals, but that happens when local citizens get engaged in school board races, city council races, state house, state senate races. The hard part is, I would say, that in our country that districts are drawn, so that they go one way or the other, and it doesn't really create a lot of parity anymore, which does create a really partisan nature.
That's gerrymandering.
Well, it's gerrymandering, but a lot of it kind of benefits both parties in terms of who gets in which districts, and that makes it harder and harder, especially around issues like public education. I've always felt it's strongest with school boards that are nonpartisan. That are really nonpartisan school boards that really look for the greater good of what's best inside of public education. I think it's tough when we do politicize public education. I think it gets hard, and so the more we can work, and that's what we're trying to bring to the table, research-based strategies that work, and we think that should be the basis of what we determine improves our public schools. Look, we know many of our public schools are struggling, and we would not deny that. We just think there's a different approach. The governor's laid out his approach. Many folks have different approaches. And there's many things that we haven't talked much about the Governor's Education Reform Commission, but there's many things in that we agree with. Things like giving teachers more planning time. In terms of for veteran teachers, maybe not have as many observations. Freeing up assistant principals and principals to work with newer teachers. The pre-K initiative, expanding pre-K. There's a lot of common ground that we think we can build on, but we want to have ideas at the table so that there's a good, healthy debate in the public sphere, so that we can all, because I think all of our goal is to create the best public schools possible, but we've got to do that, and so it's tough when you lay in the larger political perspective. But again, our goal as an organization is to work with both sides of the aisle, that folks that are pro public education and really believe in trying to find what's the best method possible. Those are the legislators that we want to work with. And then the folks that aren't on our side is how do we convince them, based on relationships on the ground, getting our members in their districts to tell their stories and to share our research, because that's what we think is the best path to the future to a strong public school system in the state of Georgia.
Georgia is a right-to-work state.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers can't go on strike.
Mm-hmm.
So is Florida. It's a right-to-work state as well. Teachers can't go on strike. Teachers as advocates, teachers as activists, do you think that GAE and NEA have worked to mobilize the community, the local and national community, to become activists? Because one of the things that I prize more than anything else was winning the NEA and the Asala National Award for Black History and Culture. As an activist and an organizer, NEA, I was president of the Black Caucus for the state of Florida. And when the Black History Bill came up, that was uppermost on my agenda to make sure that it got support from our Florida Black Caucus. So the activism that the NEA allows, how is it translated here in Georgia? I mean,
Well, I think our goal here in Georgia is, as we talked about earlier, that our members need to be involved in the process. Teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, parents, students should be engaged. And the skill I always talk about teaching is learning the skills of how to govern. It's easy sometimes to protest something. It's hard to put out an alternative. And so I think our members in the community should learn to read budgets. They should understand how school budgets are created, because that's really where your priorities are put into place. And if you don't like something, then put out an alternative, but you also got to figure out how to pay for it, right? So, if you have a limited budget, let's say that you want, 25% more after-school programs in a school system. The question is, that's a good goal, but how do you pay for it? And so those are the kind of skills we want to teach, is working with superintendents and school boards, that we bring our own plans to the table. And then that's part of democracy. You got to debate it out. Sometimes you have to compromise. Sometimes you don't get it. And that's the piece. And then, of course, if you don't have school board members that work with the community, then that's where folks have to be involved in the electoral process to get school board members that share the common values of that community and neighborhood. So, when you talk about activism, we were firm believers that folks be involved, but also giving them the skills to be effective. So we're not just always on the outside, but we're part of the process and trying to drive our public schools forward.
the new president of NEA, what's her name?
Lily Eskelsen Garcia.
Okay, is she the first Latino?
I think so, but I'm not positive. But I think she's the first Latina president, and I think also she was our first woman president as well. Or not? No, that was before. That's right. That's right.
We had Mary.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
remember
right.
her.
Before. That's right. But definitely the first Latina. Yep.
First Latino.
Yep.
So I hope NEA and GAE see an uptick in activism here in the state of Georgia. Because, to be honest, I see union busting possibilities with the governor's initiative. Excuse me. Not to sound like an alarmist, but I see union busting. And that was one of the things that I put in my letter to the editor, to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They left out. But what stands between public education and is the teachers union. In Florida, we had a very active teachers union. In Georgia, you have 3 factions, so there's more to contend with. But I would hope that this attempt by the governor is not an attempt to bust the union. What do you think of that?
Well, I think, one of the strengths about Georgia, we don't have collective bargaining rights, as you mentioned earlier. Georgia is a right-to-work state. But one thing, when you look at collectively, the educator organizations, our members are joiners, right? You have over, between all the organizations, well over 100,000 members. And so I think that's a positive, right? That teachers get involved in one of the 3 organizations, and there's more than the 3. Each organization has a little different style and culture, but most of our goals are the same in terms of improving public education, finding what's best for the students. Organize. That's our profession, right? And so that we put our ideas. Just same with the law. Lawyers have organizations, doctors have organizations, businesses have organizations. The Chamber of Commerce.
2 minutes.
And so that's, so that I would say that that's a positive, is that we have a lot of members in the state of Georgia. And the key is you got to get involved in the electoral process, because there isn't collective bargaining and things like that in
What
the
I've
state
been
of
told
Georgia.
by my co-producer Robert Parker III, that we have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Well, Chris, I certainly have enjoyed broaching all the topics that
Yes.
we've
Yeah, we've
broached.
covered a lot of ground today.
Covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
The time just went by.
It did.
At People TV, that's how we do it.
Yep.
We try to bring cutting edge and foster the ideas that are at the mainstay of change
Yes.
in education,
Yep.
culture,
Yep.
arts,
Yep.
the humanities,
Yep.
and politics. Absolutely politics.
Thanks for having me. Be
Thanks,
part of
sir.
the conversation today. Yeah.
All
Hope
right.
you feel better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry to my audience, I'm fighting the cold, but I just thought that it was very important that we get this out there. And think. Talk to your representatives about the Opportunity School District proposed by Governor Deal. Vote no. Opportunity sounds like something positive, but in this case, it's negative. The old sleight of hand, so to speak. So, thanks for Executive Director of GAE, Chris Bauman.